Welcome to Mic Drop, the podcast where relevancy is irrelevant and we don't give a shit about your feelings.
The President of the United States of America takes pride in presenting the Silver Star posthumously to Aviation Ordnanceman 2nd Class Marc Lee, United States Navy, for conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity in action against the enemy as an assaulter and automatic weapons gunner in Sea, Air, Land Team 3. Naval Special Warfare Task Group Arabian Peninsula in support of Operation Iraqi Freedom on 2 August 2006. Petty Officer Lee conducted clearance operations in south-central Ramadi as a member of Naval Special Warfare Combat Advisory Element for the Iraqi Army. During the operation, one element member was wounded by enemy fire. The element completed the casualty evacuation, regrouped, and returned onto the battlefield to continue the fight. Petty Officer Lee and his SEAL element maneuvered to assault an identified enemy position. He, his teammates, Bradley fighting vehicles, and Abrams tanks engaged enemy positions with suppressive fire. During the assault, his team came under heavy enemy fire from an adjacent building to the north. To protect the lives of his teammates, he fearlessly exposed himself to direct enemy fire by engaging the enemy with his machine gun and was mortally wounded in that engagement. His brave actions in the line of fire saved the lives of many of his teammates. Petty Officer Lee's courageous leadership, operational skill, and selfless dedication to duty reflected great credit upon him and were in keeping with the highest traditions of the United States Naval Service. Action date August 2, 2006. Ladies and gentlemen, to say that I'm humbled to have my next guest on this podcast is an understatement. She is the Gold Star mother of Marc Lee, the first SEAL killed in action in Iraq. She is the founder and CEO of a nonprofit, America's Mighty Warriors, which specializes in supporting our veterans and the families of the fallen. She's also known to the entire SEAL community as Mama Lee. Please welcome Debbie Lee.
Thank you so much, Mike. It's an honor to be here today, but boy, hearing Marc's Silver Star Award read again just reminds me, the blessing that I had first to be that young man's mom and the amazing, selfless individual that he was. He literally made the choice that day to give his life to save his teammates. And I miss him very much, but so very proud of him. Yeah.
I mean, I can tell you, just me reading it, to me it was very obvious that my voice was a little shaky. Mm-hmm. It's hard for me to get through it, even been as long as it has, and as many times as I've read it, and as many times as I've heard the story, and as many people as I know that were there. And it's still a tough thing to talk about and get through, and I think that speaks volumes to, the magnitude with which he conducted himself mm-hmm. that day. And so, it's an absolute honor having you here. I'm looking forward to getting into the details of both him and what you're doing now. And one thing that's neat, we've had a number of guests on so far, and they've all been guys, and in true mic drop fashion, it is kind of a men's town or man show style of interviewing to a certain extent. But you are our first female guest. And
I promise I won't disappoint.
Yeah.
The guys stay with us because you won't want to miss this. It will be men's talk as well.
No, absolutely. And but it's an honor to have you be the first female guest. I can't think of a more fitting individual to claim that title. And the release date is special. With September 11th coming up and it being released then, and the ties to our community mm-hmm. and the loss experienced that day. I think it's a very fitting and appropriate release for this episode. So thank you for coming. I know you're busy. You're here in Texas, but I know that it's hard to squeeze in time for all of us, and I can't thank you enough for.
Well, it's an honor to be here, and it's my privilege to take that time to be able to do that. I'm very proud of you as well and what you continue to do. And so to be able to be here with you today and inspire, encourage, share Marc's heroic story, talk about what we're doing, give people motivation and hope.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Amen. All right. So One thing I do like to do kind of right out of the gate is to, to relax and get the creative juices flowing, is just kind of a little lightning round of just some random questions that aren't necessarily in any order of specificity or importance, but, just to take the edge off a little bit and get things going. One of the things I like to ask every single person that comes on here is, what is your morning routine?
My morning routine is I get up and do some type of workout, whether it's in the gym, go for a walk, swim in the pool, and then I have my quiet time. I'm a believer, and so I pull out my Bible and usually my protein shake for the morning, and that's how I start my day. My days are crazy busy, and if I don't take that time first thing in the morning to get those two things that are very important to me done, then I get sidetracked. I mean well, and pretty soon it's 11 o'clock at night, and I'm exhausted.
What time is first thing in the morning for you? What time do you get up?
Oh, Lordy be. It depends on what part of the country I'm in.
Yeah.
I would say a typical morning, if I'm not on the road and doing an event, is probably 6:30.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's pretty reasonable. I know that's, like I said, one of the things I like to ask everybody is what time they get up. I'm not a morning person, but one thing I am curious, I mean, you travel, half the year at least?
Yeah, probably pretty much.
So, I mean, are you able to fit that in, throughout all of the travel? Like, do you still maintain that up early and go for a walk?
It's more difficult when I'm out traveling. Lots of times, like last night, we flew into Dallas. I got in here at 1:30 this morning, so I did not get up this morning and do a workout.
Yeah.
We had things we had to get the rental car, get things going on the road, and get out here. But I do try to still commit to that. Maybe it's throughout the day, that happens. Because I do travel a lot, I'll be in the airport, and if I'm there early for my flight, I go do laps around the airport, hauling my suitcase around there, getting those extra steps in. So I'm pretty committed to making sure those 10,000 steps are always in.
Are you a Fitbit person?
I do wear my Fitbit. I don't know that it controls me, but I do like to try to just make sure I always get those 10,000 steps in a day.
Yeah. No, I hear you. To me, it's fascinating with from a fitness standpoint, the psychology behind the Fitbit, mentality of people and how powerful it is. Frankly, like, I mean, people, not that they're controlled by it necessarily.
Oh, some people are. Some people are addicted to it.
Yeah, like
I'm not one of them, but I do like to try to gauge and say, okay.
It kind of steps in line with Facebook and Instagram likes, almost like people are constantly checking to see how many
that's
steps
not
they
me.
have.
Yeah, I do wear it, but that's not me.
Is there, in terms of how you eat, you work out every day, you seem like you maintain a pretty good level of fitness. Are you particular about what you eat?
I am pretty particular about what I eat. I try to do the low carb, not so much keto, but close to that, low carb, high protein.
Yeah.
My body, I am probably addicted to carbohydrates.
Yeah.
Love carbohydrates. If I stay away from them, I don't crave them.
Yeah.
So, and I found that's what works for me. I got a pretty messed up metabolism, so I have to be pretty careful.
Yeah.
Especially with being on the road all the time. People, want to show their compassion to me by buying me dessert after dinner.
Or here's a
I'm
birthday
like,
cake.
No, I'm good, really. Yeah. Thank you.
Take this
Just
box
give me a hug.
donuts. Yeah. No, I hear you. It's tough. I mean, I travel a fair bit too, and I know for me it's easy to fall off the carb wagon.
Yeah.
When you're on the road. But speaking of carb wagons, what is your favorite meal?
Oh, if I'm not watching carbs?
Just, I mean, you can eat whatever you want, like a cheat meal. Like if you got one?
Probably Mexican food.
A specific kind?
Yeah, chips,
anything?
Salsa.
Queso?
Yeah, all of the above.
Yeah, everything. All right. You throw a margarita in there? Or?
Oh, of course, yeah. Throw a margarita in there.
All right.
Yeah, I did enough partying when I was younger, though, that usually it's a margarita. I don't want to regret, wake up the next day and go, I did what last night?
No, I know it. It's and it doesn't get any easier. I know even, turning 40 here recently, like Jesus, the things that I used to be able to do at 25 versus now are a stark contrast. I know it
Nor would we
easier.
want to do some of those things that we did back then.
Yeah, no doubt. What does a standard day off look like if you do have a day? Yeah, I know. What's that? If you ever have one, like when was?
I'd say for me, probably a standard day off would be. I'm blessed to have 11 grandkids, and I have 5 of them close to me. So my day off would be to go grab my 5 grandkids and swim in the pool. Yeah. Go to a movie, go out to eat, go for a little hike, spending time with them. Yeah. That's what rejuvenates me. I love being around my my grandkiddos.
So running a daycare is what a day off looks like for you.
Well, actually, I, for 15 years, had a preschool and kindergarten
really?
with 45 children around me, and I loved it. So I guess you're right on.
Yeah, bringing it back.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, people are always like, you take all 5 of your grandkids at the same time?
How old are they?
The ones that are near me are 11, 8, 6, 4, and 1.
And
4 boys on the top, and they finally were
swimming.
blessed with a little girl.
Yeah.
So,
And you take all of them swimming at the same time?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd see one of them would drown if I
Oh
was.
no, we've done drown proofing with the boys. People are just like, "What kind of grandma drown proofs her grandkids?" Well, I had a Marine as their father, and Mark was a SEAL, so you got to teach them. I mean, obviously, I don't go to the extent that they do in buds, but you know, they need to know a few of these things.
You're doing some remedial waterboarding if they get out of line.
Exactly.
Yeah. What is your most embarrassing moment?
Oh, my most embarrassing. Well, I don't know if it's my most, but the one that comes to mind, I was a cheerleader in high school, and our football stadium was a sunken one. So I had been at the top of the stairs, and I'm 5'10", and I've got really long legs, and our skirts were pretty doggone short. I mean, they just barely covered your tushy. You wore tights underneath, but I was at the top of the stairs, and I tripped and rolled all the way down the stairs. And we were there early, but it was a regional track meet, and so there was probably about 8 other schools with all the guys down there. And of course, they're all concerned. Oh my gosh, is she all right? Well, I was fine. I mean, I had a few bruises, but nothing was broken. But I'll tell you what, my pride was, I was like, please don't anybody look at me. Don't know who that was that just rolled down those stairs.
I still can't believe you were a cheerleader. Like I'm kind of floored by that, actually, from knowing you as long as I have, I guess. That I didn't see that one coming.
Yeah, no, I was a cheerleader for several years.
And was it a specific sport or several?
No, we did. We were a small school, so we did all the sports.
Did all of them.
But I loved football and wrestling. Those are my 2 favorite.
Yeah. That's good stuff. Favorite flavor of ice cream?
Chocolate mint.
Chocolate mint.
Yes.
All right. I think I actually know the answer to this next question. If it's the same one we talked about at Sturgis here, but what's the last book you read?
Oh boy, last book I read. You might need to answer this for me and refresh my memory.
It was the one that you told me.
Yes, I read.
I can't remember the name of it, but
I can see the cover on it.
it's a green cover, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh wow, it is an amazing story of an operator. 6 Days to Zeus. Phew, I pulled that up.
Yeah.
And absolutely amazing book. And I know the gentleman that wrote it. It's under a fictitious name, and it's supposedly not a real story. But as I'm reading through it, I was just blown away by the things that happened to him over and over, not just in combat, but in his life and the surgeries he had. And wow.
Yeah, I mean, just the description you gave me, it sounded like it was quite the shit sandwich, almost more on a personal level, like when he got back to things he dealt with between his spouse and other teammates, and what the green machine was doing to him and everything.
It was bizarre. I mean, to the point of I'm reading through this going, okay, I know this is not all exactly his story because obviously for security reasons, he had to change a few things and did change all the names. But when I texted him, I said, "How much is this is really your story?" And he said, "Most of it." And I was just like, "Oh my gosh!"
Yeah.
So I would encourage everybody to go pick up a copy of 6 Days to Zeus. It is just absolutely amazing.
Yeah, no, it sounds like it. All right, last question is a cabin with a hot fire in the cold mountains or a cabana on the beach in 85-degree weather?
Definitely cabana on the
right?
beach. Yes.
Your beach gal?
I love the mountains.
Yeah.
But I grew up in Colorado.
Yeah.
We did a lot of the snow.
Yeah.
And the older I get, the more my body loves. I live in Phoenix.
Yeah.
And that's
So you're digging the
definitely
heat.
my climate. I like the drier, climate than the hot dry versus the hot humid. But I love the ocean, love the beach.
So the joints are digging the heat, right?
You betcha.
Yeah,
You betcha.
Well, you answered my next question. I think you're cheating off of my outline here. I'm gonna have to
Really, I can't see that far.
I'm gonna have to give you the hands up like we're cheating in school. You said you're from Colorado, but where in Colorado did you grow up? And give me kind of a brief synopsis of what your childhood was like.
I was born in Greeley. Grew up there till probably 5th grade, and then we moved down to the Denver area and the suburbs. Kind of a dysfunctional family, very much so. My mom got pregnant with me, and my grandmother arranged for my mom to marry her boyfriend at the time. So he was
Really?
35, she was 17.
Jesus.
I didn't know he wasn't my dad until I was 16.
Your mom arranged that, you said?
My grandmother,
Your grandmother arranged that.
And I think, looking back then, they were trying to, cover up that she'd gotten pregnant,
Yeah.
God forbid. My mom was a very compliant, introvert. So, if that had been me and somebody told me that, I'm like, there's no way in heck I'm raising, going to marry that old guy. I'll raise this child by myself. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
But so when I was 11, I was already 5'9".
Yeah.
My dad's 5'5", my mom's 5'6", and there's nobody tall in the family. We're starting to read about this in school and the DNA, and I'm like, something's not right. So I met my biological dad when I was 16, and he's 6'4" on one side and 5'9" on the other. As he told me on the phone, I'm like, well, what kind of freak are you? But he had lost his leg in a tractor accident.
Oh, really?
So that's where I got my height from. But,
okay.
Yeah.
And did you have siblings?
I do. I don't have. I'm the only biological full. But there's 13 between stepsisters, half sisters, half brothers, stepbrothers. Like I said, pretty dysfunctional family.
And so, like from the actual house that you grew up in, what was that like in terms of how many people were in it and what the dynamic?
In the house
was?
that I grew up with, I had a brother who was 3 years younger than me.
Mm-hmm. And that was it.
That was it. My mom married again later in life, and so I was 14. She married again, and that half brother, I left home when I was 16, so he was there for a couple of years. But those were the two that I basically grew up with. Although I'm closer to my brother, half brother on my biological dad's side, who I never lived with. Yeah. But there's we think more like he was in the Air Force. Just retired after 33 years. Yeah. So that our build, our structure, family structure is bigger. We think more alike, and
that's interesting. I mean, I guess from just it being a different time and what have you. But, I'm curious, I guess, growing up in that environment, was there anything that shaped you to A, leave at 16, and B, do you think that had an impact in terms of what you're doing now? That in terms of wanting to give back to communities, regardless of the circumstances in which the middle part of your life got you there. Was there any influence, militarily, patriotic, whatever, that contributed to? There
really wasn't in my home growing up. I didn't know anybody that served in the military.
What were your thoughts of service members, generally speaking, like growing
I don't know, growing up, that I really did have any. Like I said, we didn't talk about that. The man who raised me, that I thought was my dad, was, sergeant in the police department for the Greeley Police, and I think there's definitely some patriotism that comes in there. I know that we always loved our flag. Mm-hmm. I think my faith was a big part of understanding, the country, our responsibility to the country, and you'd ask about helping others. That's how I'm wired, to help others and be there and encourage and support. And Mark was that same way, obviously very selfless to give his life, but, people would say he was the underdog. He would go to those people that were underdogs. Yeah. Somebody's picking on them, bullying on them. He didn't care. He was going to go stand up for them and take care of a need. But that's just it built in me to help others and want to, give back.
Sure. Was there a significant driver or influence that made you leave at 16?
I think I'm very stubborn, very hard-headed. At 16, I was pretty sure I knew everything. At 18, I was convinced I knew everything. But 16, I think I was working towards that attitude. That was when I found out that the man that was my father, my mom and I were actually fighting. And she said, "You don't even know who your father is."
Oh, really?
And I looked at her because there had been some other circumstances that made, that she was, there were just other circumstances. Yeah. And I said, "Do you?" I'm 16. It's like, that's thrown in my face, and she slapped me upside of the face. And I deserved it. That wasn't very respectful, what I said to her. But you don't tell a 16-year-old girl that she doesn't know who her father is that way. Yeah. And so I think that just kind of put me on a tailspin. She had just married again. And I just,
that was it.
Actually, when I left home, she didn't know I was for 3 days that I'd left.
Really?
So it was difficult circumstances. Yeah. And my mom, is gone now, but, she had gone through a lot in her life, and I think she just didn't have the coping skills to know a lot how to deal with things,
Sure.
and how to do that. And I think she gave the best that she thought she could at the time in the midst of all the pain and the things she'd been through.
Yeah. That's a tough way to go, no doubt about it. I know it makes me think of things in terms of being a father and my kids and how to interact and navigate that process, which some of it I'm looking forward to, some not so much, but it's, it's.
Well, and then you throw the hormones in there,
Oh, God. Yeah. No,
not just the girls. I mean, the guys are.
Yeah.
But
no.
parenting is I tell people the hardest thing I've ever done, but the most rewarding thing I've ever done too.
No, it absolutely is. I mean, they'll make you laugh harder than you've ever laughed, and make you sadder or more worried than you've ever been in your life too. But so from when you moved out until having Mark, can you give kind of the chronological timeline of what that looked like?
Sure. When I left, I actually stayed with an aunt. My Aunt Betty has been like my mama most of my life. Love her to pieces. Amazing gift that God's given to me and her. But I lived with her for a while, and then they found out that the school I was going to, that I was out of the district. So I was going to have to pay $200 a month tuition to go to a public school back then.
Yeah.
And so I moved in with a great aunt who lived in the school district. And then I married at 18.
Really?
So I was married very young. Actually had my own apartment right after I got out of high school.
Yeah.
But married at 18. At 20, had my first son, Christopher. And at 21, had my daughter. And at 23, had Christopher. And was going through a divorce. I found out 2 weeks after the divorce that I was pregnant with Mark. So
Wow.
there was no light at the end of the tunnel. I had a 3-year-old and an 18-month-old, and I'm pregnant. No child support, no help from their father, or many other family members there. But part of that perseverance and determination from the other struggles that I'd been through in my life are what brought me to that place to say, I'm not going to quit. I am going to raise these 3 children by myself. I'm not going to live on welfare. This is not the government's responsibility. This is my responsibility. And there were times I worked 3 jobs, worked 96 hours a week 1 year just to be able to take care of them.
And so the 2 things stick out with me with that is that, number one, I have no doubt that, setting that example and being that for your kids, I mean, they notice those things, and I can't help but think that had to have played a significant role in influencing Mark and I'm sure your other kids. But I'm surprised and a little bit baffled, I guess, in hearing that there was no support, like the father to. I mean, it's the same father for all 3 kids, right?
All 3 kids have the same dad. He was an alcoholic and was also doing drugs, and so that was his priority in his life.
Yeah.
And my mom forbid me to marry him.
So of course you did.
Yes, of course I did. We talked about that strong will a little bit earlier, and literally, if she would have left me alone and we'd have dated for a while, I'd have seen some of these things and said, I want no part of this.
Yeah.
But literally, when you're a strong-willed person, please don't forbid a strong-willed, unless you want to motivate them to do something.
Yeah,
now, that always works well,
But you can't.
But it was not, it was not good. We were married for 4.5 years, and the final time he almost killed me. My 3-year-old sat on the couch and watched him, almost take my life. And if it wouldn't have been, we were living in a condo, and if it wouldn't have been for the neighbors next door who heard me screaming, I probably wouldn't be here today, and it would be a totally different story. But again, those trials and difficulties, that my children have had to live through with me are what, you have that choice, how you handle that. And I tell people all the time with Mark, I had no choice the news that was given to me on August 2nd, but I did have a choice how I responded. And because those responses before in life when the trials came were, I'm not quitting, we're not giving up, we're going to keep going through, I'm not sure how we're going to get through this, but we're just going to do one step at a time, and we're going to continue to push through.
Yeah.
And that builds that strength, that builds that character as you go through that process. And so the next time when the struggle's a little bit harder, you've got some experience to base that on, and you're like, nope, we're going to make it through. We're going to stick together. We're going to get this done.
And to me, it's the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, and that by being that example for your kids, that's what they learn in terms of, okay, you get handed this shit sandwich, this is how you respond to it.
Yeah.
And to me, that's one of the things I see that's severely lacking in our society today, is that, there's very few good shining examples as to how to handle things and how to conduct yourself under times of duress, in terms of kids seeing their parents go through that. And I think it's one of the biggest detriments of society is lack of that.
I always say I was not the perfect mom. I don't want anybody to get the wrong idea here, because I was not. But in the midst of those those struggles and the imperfections, and as you go through and go, that was stupid. Why did I do that? That you learn, you mature. Yeah. As I said, I was a very young, mom. But that, I agree with you that perseverance, my kids did see that. While I may not have been perfect, they saw that, that's not how, we don't quit when we handle things. We don't go, get in the welfare lines and expect somebody else to take care of us.
Just keep driving no matter what happens.
Exactly.
No, it's a priceless lesson, no doubt about it. And clearly was passed on with precision, accuracy, no doubt about it. So from that point on, then, was Mark's dad ever in his life growing up at all?
Mark saw his father, his biological father, 5 times in his life. And it was not like I spent 5 summers, with my dad. In passing, he saw him 5 times. Yeah. And Mark said, that man is not my father. He's the sperm donor. And when he first said that to me, I'm like, Mark, come on. Yeah. That's pretty harsh. But in reality, that's probably pretty stinking close.
If the shoe fits, right?
Yeah. Exactly.
Was there any other male role models in Mark's life as he grew up? Or
I was single for 8.5 years and then married again. Unfortunately, probably not another real wise choice that I made in marriage. And that's why for the last 24 years, I've been single. Yeah. But he ended up committing suicide and took his own life. And about that time, there was a youth pastor in Mark's life that I think was probably a really good role model for Mark, and kind of stepped in and helped there and did some things.
Yeah. Is that somebody he kept in touch with all through?
It is, yes.
That's awesome.
He actually spoke at Mark's funeral.
Oh, really?
He ended up being one of Mark's soccer coach.
Wow.
And so, he stayed in touch with him. They were there in San Diego, so he would, visit on different weekends there when he was going through buds. And
that's cool.
So,
I'm curious, what was Mark like as a kid?
Oh, Mark was my jokester. Oh my gosh, that kid had a sense of humor. And again, I go back to, I've just gone through a divorce. I got a 3-year-old. At this point, he would have been 3.5, and Cheryl would have been 2 when Mark was born. But he had a sense of humor from the time he was, could barely walk, you know. And I remember him when he was about 3 telling knock-knock jokes. And he thought they were hilarious. And they were the stupidest knock-knock jokes. But you'd watch him laughing at himself, and you couldn't help but laugh seeing how funny he thought he was. But I remember I was potty training him when he was probably, 18 months, 2. And the little wooden potties, that were on the floor. And he was doing his big job. So I left him in there and was doing dishes or something, and I thought, well, what's that noise? Did I leave the stereo on? I didn't think I turned it on. I looked, nope, stereo's not on, TV's not on, and it was Mark in the bathroom. That kid, Disney didn't need to hire anybody. They could have hired Mark, and he could make every noise, every sound, sing songs. It was just absolutely amazing. He ended up getting class clown 2 years in a row in high school, and I'm always like, and that's going to get you to college? How? So, great sense of humor. Very loving, affectionate. I can also remember in high school dropping him off. We homeschooled him, and he played sports with the local high school. Mm-hmm. And I'd drop him off to the bus, and he'd come over and give me a big kiss and hug as he walked away. And usually, most boys at 16, 17, they're like,
they want nothing to do with mom or dad.
Maybe you'll get the head shake or the nod, or
or the hey, can you drop me off down the street?
Yeah. Please don't be seen with me. So no.
There's got to be like an embarrassing story that he has from growing up.
Oh, embarrassing story.
Or maybe a time that you were frustrated with him. It can't all be roses, right? Like when did Mark piss you off? There had to have been at least once.
Oh, see, I'm a bad one. I don't retain a lot of those things, which is probably good with some of the crap that was in my past. But I do remember one time when I came home after being visiting my mom, and my kids are half Spanish. He dyed his hair blonde.
Went the M&M route?
Yeah. He only did that once. And again, it was like, okay, choose your battles. Yeah. This is not a battle that you need to say anything about. But it didn't look very good on him.
How old was he when he did that?
He was probably 17 or maybe 18. Yeah.
Was what was his relationship like with his two older siblings? Was it like Leave It to Beaver, or did they battle it out? Or
both, all of the above. There were times, that they would battle it out, but there were times that they were, best buddies.
Yeah. Typical sibling stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any?
I'm going to beat the snot out of you, but don't let anybody else beat one of my brothers or sisters up. But,
What are his siblings doing? What was their path?
My oldest son was in the Marines. He is out now and works for Department of Public Service in Arizona as a mid-level communications manager. Met his wife when he was stationed in Okinawa for 6 years.
Oh, wow.
And so the 5 children that are close to me, grandchildren, are half Japanese, beautiful kiddos.
Yeah, that's cool.
My daughter, who worked for me for many years in the preschool as a teacher, married a young man who then after they married went in the Army and was a captain, was in Iraq when we first went over. And he just did one enlistment and then got out, and they have 6 children.
Yeah.
Her experience as, in the school, at one point, the first gentleman she was dating seriously, she wanted 13 children. He said, 13. That's not me. And I think because she had a classroom of 10 children,
she wanted her own classroom.
She did great. She figured it'd be easy. And I'm like, again, that's not a battle you choose. Once she starts having children and having to pay for them, that's a little different than having them for 10 hours a day, in your classroom. Yeah. But she has 6, and I think they would have more if it were up to her. But her husband, they're good. They actually had 5 biologically and then just adopted a drug baby that they had since she was 2 days old. And she's 2 now, and they fought like heck in court to get her.
Yeah. To me, it's that number of kids. I mean, I have 2, and my parents had 4, and I know my grandparents on my grandfather on my mom's side, I mean, they had 8 or 9, I think. And, to me, that's astounding. Like, the 2 that I have now are enough of a handful to where, like, I can't even wrap my mind around having 6, 7, 8, 10 kids. Like, I don't even know how you deal with that.
Right.
But obviously people do it. Fewer people do it nowadays, but,
and I think when the families were bigger, the moms were able to stay home.
Yeah.
A lot of them didn't have to work.
Yeah. Well, I think there was a lot more to do around the house that they needed.
A lot of it was farm life, where they were out busy working the farm, staying busy. So
yeah, now you'd be running a daycare, having 13 kids running around a backyard trying to herd cats on ice. In terms of him growing up, and you mentioned homeschooling, was a big factor of that from running a daycare that you wanted to homeschool to do both, or what? How did that shake out? What was the kind of the driving force behind homeschooling?
I think part of that was just some of the stuff that we saw happening in the public schools that we didn't agree with, and it wasn't anything that I chose to do. My second marriage, my husband came home one day and said, you're homeschooling the children. We're not going to deal with this anymore. Yeah. And I'm like, oh, all right. Yeah. And that was before I had the school. So this was something all new to me. We were pretty poor. Yeah. So there was no money to go buy curriculum or get books. It's not like today where you got the online schools that you could take advantage of that. And so I had to develop our own curriculum.
So you were voluntold to homeschool.
Yeah, I was voluntold. Exactly. But I look back again to that preparation. Mm-hmm. That gave me time to spend, some great quality time with my kids. Yeah. It was, the beginning of their life was pretty rough and pretty rocky, Mm-hmm. And so this was a time where I could kind of calm things out, build a little more confidence, contempt, make it easier for them and not so rough at that point, make it easier, give them everything, because I think parents, make a mistake when they start feeling, oh, my children have gone through so much, I got to compensate and give them this and do that for them, and not make them do chores or stuff. But, so I think it was definitely a benefit. When I started this school, then my oldest had already graduated. He did his GED in the state, just so I could kind of know where I was at, what I still needed to teach to him, and came home with one of the highest scores on a GED that anyone had ever had in Oregon. So I'm like, I'm good. I'm done. We're finished. Yeah. And then when my husband died and I'm trying to run the business and homeschool, it just got to be too much. So we put him in the private Christian school there most of the year. He couldn't play with the high school team that he played with several years going to the Christian school because they had their own team. So then I would take him out during soccer season and homeschool him so he could still play with the team that he played with for many years.
Yeah. Well, did he just play soccer or did he play other sports growing up too?
He played baseball 1 year.
Did he swim at all?
Didn't swim at all until he wanted to become a Navy SEAL. That's when he started going to the pool and doing laps. So we didn't have any money to do. There were no little league sports and stuff for them growing up.
Yeah.
He came home his freshman year and said, "Mom, I'm going to be a professional soccer player." And I'm like, "Okay, Mark. Well, I've always taught my kids if you put your mind to it, you can do anything that you determine in your mind you're going to do. But Mark, you've never played soccer in your life."
Yeah.
And he was, in fact, trying out for the Colorado Rapids.
Really?
And blew out his knee, which is the professional soccer team in Colorado. Blew out his knee the night before tryouts. And he was the youngest soccer coach they ever had at the high school where he went to. And an amazing, amazing soccer player. Actually played with the Iraqis in Ramadi. And I guess several of the SEAL teams had kind of an ongoing competition over there. And they were never able to beat the locals.
Yeah, I mean...
Mark's team beat the locals.
No way.
Yes.
Oh, that's awesome.
And they said, we got to have a rematch. We got to have a rematch. And I said, well, that rematch is going to have to be in heaven now.
Yeah.
But, there was actually someone who told me one of the local soccer fields there that was dedicated to Mark from the Iraqis.
No way.
So, yeah. Then just 2 summers ago, the Colorado Rapids called me and presented me his team jersey. So
that was kick-ass.
That was pretty cool.
That was really
pretty
cool.
awesome.
Yeah, it's a hell of a gesture from him, too.
Yes.
Shout out to the Colorado Rapids?
Rapids.
Rapids.
Yes.
Shout out to the Rapids. Get you guys on here at some point. Were there any, significantly traumatic or big kind of life-changing events during his childhood, do you think that shifted him, whether it was to serve or just generally speaking? I'm always curious in people with fascinating stories, especially of heroism to this magnitude. If there's something that, you'd mentioned that he was always the guy that, defended the indefensible.
Right.
And, was there anything that kind of significant that happened? I know for me there was, but I'm curious, can you pinpoint anything that kind of drove him?
I don't know that there was anything significant. I know that it was very difficult, when my second husband died.
Yeah.
And very traumatic, to watch not just himself feel the pain, but to watch what, Mom was going through as well.
Yeah.
I think 9/11 obviously impacted all of us, although Mark was already in the military.
Yeah.
In August of 2000, my oldest son went in the Marines. In October of 2000, my son-in-law went in the Army. Mark and my son's name is Chris. My son-in-law is Chris as well, so that can get confusing. But my son-in-law, Chris, Mark and he were pretty good buddies in high school. And I think there was probably a lot of that competitiveness. He was the youngest, so he was always going to, felt like he was trying to vie for attention or prove something. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's kind of a characteristic of that younger child.
Yeah.
But, and he came home in May and said, I was at the recruiter. I signed up. I'm going to try to be a Navy SEAL. He, had the contract.
Yeah.
Doesn't guarantee you'll be a SEAL, but to go to BUD/S.
Yeah, the dive fair contract.
Yeah.
Well, so that's interesting. So, there wasn't would you say that patriotism or service to one's country, things of that order, was that something that was instilled, talked about a lot, or was military service not something that, that was a role or a factor in any of your kids' lives?
There wasn't anybody, a family member that they had my brother was in the military, but he was in England, and because I met him later in life, there wasn't that growing up connection, for my kids. But when Mark was asked before, why'd you become a Navy SEAL? He's like, it's all those military movies Mom made us watch. And that's just something I've always been drawn to know that there are men and women that would go fight for me, for my freedoms. I've always known that someone paid that price, and I've never taken that for granted. Obviously, more so now, losing Mark and having a even deeper price that our family knows for paying for that freedom. Yeah. But I've always respected our military, and when my boys talked about it, I'm like, that's awesome. I'm proud of you.
Yeah. So it was really kind of off the cuff, and he surprised you by joining?
Yeah, I think every young man that watches any of the Navy SEAL movies, they look at that and they're like, I'm going to be a Navy SEAL, but they don't follow through and make a plan to do that. Mark had gone to seminary to be a pastor down at the Master's College and was playing soccer down there as well. His first year, he was going to be a youth pastor. And then when he went back, he decided he was going to change and be a lawyer. And so
that's quite the shift.
My warped sense of humor. Yeah. I say first he was going to save him, then he was going to defend him, and then he became a SEAL and just said, "I'll just kill him." But
that's awesome.
And then he went to try out for the Colorado Rapids. Well, when he blew out his knee, then he came back home, and was recuperating. And while he was doing that, that's when he really started reading some, other books that Navy SEALs had written. And I think that's when he really put his mind to it. And you'd see his notes as he prepared, workouts and how many reps of what he was going to do. And that's when he started going to the swimming pool near us and just swimming like crazy, And again, he'd never had even swim lessons. Yeah. We couldn't afford that. Yeah. And so the determination and the perseverance in that young man to do that, was pretty amazing.
I mean, not to call your other kids out, but did you see a disparity between his drive and self-initiative and proactivity in comparing or contrasting it to your other kids? Were they all kind of on that same level, or was he a kind of a notch above?
I'd say he was probably kind of a notch above. Yeah. My son-in-law, I wasn't around as much to see, his determination there. My son, Christopher, has that pretty same determination. Yeah. He was a black belt martial arts instructor for the military. And I remember when Admiral Pybus came and visited us the day after Mark had died. And, I said, man, as a single mom, my goals when my kids, got to 18, I'm like, okay, if nobody's killed in a, drive-by shooting and there's no drug overdoses and nobody's pregnant at 18, I'm good. Yeah. My standards weren't real high. So as I'm talking, we're talking about Mark and what he did, and my other son, Christopher's there, and I'm pointing over at him going, okay, maybe I went overboard a little bit. I got one that's a Navy SEAL, one that's a black belt martial arts instructor in the Marines, not that you could ever go overboard with that, but, I'm very proud of both of them and their drive and determination to,
It sounds like the whole family's a get after it, type of crew. So that's awesome to hear. That knee injury, obviously, it was significant enough to curtail the dreams of the soccer goal. But did that play a role, or did that have an impact in terms of him getting through MEPS and being able to join the Navy, or did it healed enough, but it didn't cause any
obviously
problems?
It healed enough. He had ripped his ACL and had half of his meniscus removed. Yeah. So it still boggles my mind. How did you become a Navy SEAL?
Yeah. I know you can't play soccer, but you can be a SEAL.
The meniscus was in our refrigerator for 6 months because he always wanted to show people. So I saw that piece of his body that was missing. Yeah. And you went through the training, the pounding, the running, the jumping out of airplanes. Your knees take a huge toll. But he seemed to be okay.
Did it seem to bother him at all going through training? Was that
a little bit? You would hear him say, it aches, but he had more problems. He, the first time that he went through BUDS was in class 239. Yeah. And as you know, there's that point Wednesday night, Thursday morning early, where if you get pulled, which he had pneumonia and pulmonary edema. So he had water in the lungs and water outside the lungs. And when they did the med check on him, they caught it. And even then they said, we got to yank you. And he's like, no, I got this. And
they wouldn't roll him forward.
He was an hour away from that point where he got rolled forward. Instead, he got rolled back, went back to class 240, and called me Monday night of Hell Week the second time through, which Hell Week's about 7 or 8 weeks through the training.
It's bounced around a lot. I mean, it's been as early as like the 3rd week and as late as the 5th, but it's usually the 3rd, 4th, or 5th week. So he's gone through part of that, second class again, and had rang the bell, and he called me and he said, Mom, I rang the bell. And he's a jokester. So I'm like, whatever. You want this too bad. Yeah. So what else is going on, Mark? And he's like, Mom, I'm serious. I rang the bell. Yeah. And I'm like, yeah. And I started asking him some other question. He goes, Mom, it's Monday night of Hell Week. I wouldn't have privileges to call you if, I'm like, oh, you're right. And he'd fell in love with a gal
who, convinced him this was not conducive to, family life, which it's not. It's difficult on the family.
It's almost impossible.
But so he was assigned to the USS Eisenhower, which was in dry dock in Virginia Beach.
It's always a woman. No, I'm just kidding.
It's always. Well, he still had that choice.
No, I know.
But yeah, she did weigh heavy on him to make that decision.
No doubt it.
But he was driving a shuttle bus for the Army, and I have a picture of him with his head on the big wheel, like, oh my gosh.
That's a good motivating picture for the next time around. Yeah.
And it, as you know, it's very unusual once you've rang the bell to get a chance to go back. And he had to go through a year of writing essays, doing extra PT, meeting with officers, and and rightfully so. If you've quit once, the odds probably are pretty good that you're going to do it again. And he was in running for honor man when he graduated class 251. He wasn't the honor man and I remember that call when he called and he said, "Mom, I didn't get honor man." I'm like, "Mark, you got your trident." But I get it. I'm competitive, so
So was the process of him going back through? Was that? How did that weigh on him, or from your observation, how did that weigh on him being able to go back and the seriousness of it and kind of if the stakes have been raised, so to speak? Like, did you guys talk about that at all in terms of, okay, this is my second shot, type of thing? And obviously, was he not with that woman at that point, or? Well,
he had called me, and I remember having this conversation. He said, she doesn't want me to do this. And I said, honey, are you sure this is where God wants you? Because if you're not doing what God designed you to do, you're going to come home and yell at the wife and kick the dog, and nobody's going to be happy. And he said, no, Mom, I'm sure that's where I'm supposed to be. So you need to do what it takes. You need to get your butt back there, whatever it takes. And so that's when, he went back at that time. And, a little wiser. A little more determined now, knowing
what's on the other side.
Yeah.
I know for myself and a lot of us, like, we would stand on the beach and you'd see the haze gray and underway big ass boats floating around out there. And I mean, for most of us, that was enough.
Yeah.
Seeing those ships
I don't
out
go
there,
there.
Like, I'll stick around being here wet and sandy and miserable because it beats being out there. But
yeah, because I think a lot of people don't realize that. If you wash out of buds, you still have a commitment to the Navy.
Yeah, well, and that's one of the things.
You don't just get to go home and say, "Oh, I wasn't a SEAL." You still got a commitment to the Navy.
And I think for the SEAL teams, that's something that's relatively specific to that, because there's such a disparity between the SEAL teams and the rest of the Navy. Whereas, if you try to be a MARSOC guy, a force recon, you're still going to go be a Marine and do very similar stuff, maybe not as a high level. Same with Army, you want to be a Ranger, Green Beret, whatever. You don't make it, maybe you're still 82nd Airborne or infantry or whatever, or Armored Division. I mean, you name it, you're still doing something at least in the same lines. Whereas you quit buds, like you may be slopping chow on a Navy boat, or chipping paint, or cleaning shitters, or it's just it's a huge disparity between those two things, so that certainly plays a role in helping guys be motivated to stick around. But did that woman prove to did she stay with him through buds and all that?
They actually did. We did not know they were married. So after I've been notified that my son, exactly, that is the
extra living.
She lived in New York. He lived in San Diego.
Yeah.
But yes, they were married when Mark died, and Mark loved her. And
is that do you keep in touch with her to this?
I do stay in touch with her. Not often, but I do still stay in touch with her.
Yeah. So what I'm real curious to get a mom's perspective of having a son who is a SEAL. I know for me, and I'm assuming it was probably kind of similar in that it's bittersweet, and that you're really proud of your son for what he's accomplished, but you're nervous as hell about what they're doing and when they're gone and not hearing from them and whatever. And I'll never forget, when I came home from Iraq, my mom was there, and the look on her face and just the way that she just flipped out, basically. Like, I've never seen her so relieved, and I'm curious to get kind of your perspective on what it was like now that he'd made it through and going through that kind of roller coaster of emotions of just him training and getting ready to go to work. Can you speak to that?
Sure. Very, very proud, of Mark. My personality, though, I'm not a worrier. I'm not a fretter.
Yeah.
That's just not my personality and who I am. Mark came and visited us before he deployed. He deployed the beginning of April, and his birthday is in March. So his birthday week, they came and stayed at the house for a week. And I remember when he got in his car and drove away, and we were standing out there waving at him. My oldest son was to my right and standing there on the lawn. And I looked at him. I said, I don't feel good about this. And he said, neither do I, Mom. And of course, he's like me, that same not worrier, fretter personality. Mm-hmm. But even knowing that and having that feeling when he left, it wasn't like every day when I'd see a black car drive by my house that I go, is today the day? I mean, I went on with life. I prayed for Mark more than anything I've ever prayed for in my life. But I didn't worry and fret a lot. That just, like I said, that just wasn't me. Although when I got the call that night from my son Christopher telling me to come home, I knew what was facing me, when I got home. But I really didn't worry and fret. I think at that point, because it was early on, other than we'd had Operation Red Wing the year before, there weren't very many casualties. Yeah. That was a plane that got shot out of the sky. And I think even in the community, the feeling was, we've paid our price. Yeah. We lost all that men in that mission. We've paid our price. We're going to be good. We're trained highly. We've got special equipment, That's part of when they changed some of the ways they were operating instead of just doing the night missions, and going in and taking out the enemy and getting out of there. Things had changed a little bit then, where they were working right alongside with the Army and the Marines. But I really didn't have a lot of that worry and frustration. Now, my oldest grandson is just joined the Navy.
Really?
And Grandma's got a little of that worry, frustration now, even though that's not my personality, because we have lived through it. The reality of we are in combat, Well,
I think there's a difference too with all parents when they're parents, it's a certain way, and then when they're grandparents, it's all bets are off. And
the worrying, what would the worrying have changed? Yeah, nothing. It wouldn't have changed the outcome at all. It would have physically made me sick. Nobody's thinking want to be around me. So
I know it. I tell people that all the time. Focus on the shit that you can control. Yeah. Worrying about things that you can't fix, can't control, or have no influence over is an absolute waste of time.
Yeah, totally.
So, were there any experiences, during the workup or, training in general where, you came down and visited the Bud's compound or, any stories you have of kind of leading up before that deployment that stick out as being memorable and exceptional in any way?
And part of the thing, Mark and I had conversations before he went, especially, when the one he graduated on, was no distractions. Yeah. Unless someone has died, I need to stay focused here. Yeah. And so I respected that. So I lived in Oregon, he was down in San Diego. We didn't have a lot of money to travel often. So, I don't remember. I think there was one weekend that I was down there that I saw him. Yeah. But we talked on the phone, he'd call, but I'd always keep it very light. I was having some physical struggles at the time. Didn't, let on or tell him anything about that because I knew how important that was to him to be able to stay focused.
Did you guys talk once a week, couple times a month?
Oh, no. It was usually once a week, kind of depending on what was going on. Maybe it'd be twice a week and then not for 10 days. But we'd talk. Obviously, going through Buds, I don't remember talking as often. Once he was a SEAL, we would talk, more often. But.
Yeah. Do you remember the last conversation that you had with him?
I do.
Can you walk us through that?
It was actually my birthday, which was the week before. And he'd called to tell me happy birthday. And I was really surprised, he's in the combat zone. I wasn't expecting that kiddo to give me a call. But, we talked about, when he got home, he was going to propose and ask her to marry him. And he said, start saving money because we're going to get married in Italy. We're going to have a wedding there. And
a real one, or get married again.
And I had gone. My neighbors had taken me up to one of the towns there. I can't think of the name of it, on the Nevada-Arizona border. That's one of the smaller.
Jackpot, maybe, or
not Jackpot, but close.
Yeah.
And so we were up there in a casino for my birthday. And so I remember vividly walking through the machines and looking down and going, "Oh my gosh!" And of course, you always know it's not their phone number. It doesn't say Marc Lee. They filter it through Virginia Beach. Usually was where the number. And when I saw the prefix, I'm like, "Oh, that could be Marc."
Yeah.
And sure enough, it was. And just an amazing conversation, to be able to have that. We were actually IMing the day before he died, on whatever you IM'd back then. I don't know if it was Facebook back then,
maybe, Messenger, maybe. I don't even know if it was really
It might have been. What was the other one that was the big chat group?
I don't know if
Facebook.
MySpace had...
I think it might have.
Wasn't I was never on it, I don't know, but maybe it was that. Hell, I don't know, but...
But you think even that technology, how it's changed.
No, I know it.
When our veterans were, in World War II, Korea, they would get letters, and sometimes those letters wouldn't arrive for months.
Oh, I know it. Well, and they were gone for 3-4 years.
Yeah.
I mean, it was, you go over there and you come home when the job is finished.
Yeah.
There was no rotating in and out. I remember we were in Tikrit and took down Saddam's palace. And afterwards, I was able to call home on a sat phone standing in his fucking rose garden.
Yeah.
Which, again, I couldn't disclose much,
right.
But just to be able to do that after doing something that historic and whatever, looking back on it. And that was 2003. Obviously now it's hard to even fathom really the leaps and bounds of the technological advances. Obviously across the board, but especially for the war fighters and their ability to maintain a sense of levity with home and being able to communicate more often than every couple of months is pretty neat. But
Saddam was one warped individual. I'll tell you what. I visited Iraq twice. I'm the first Gold Star mom in history to be in the combat zone. Actually went on patrol with the first to the 4th Cav 3 different times in the Door neighborhood, but was in Tikrit. Yeah. My second trip, 2010, nobody's going outside of the wire. So we just did a change of command and flew from Biop up to Tikrit. But because there was, we were at Camp Liberty and Camp Victory a lot. So, got to tour Saddam's palaces and learn a little more of the history. And I remember that one, I can't remember the name of the palace, but it was one of the smaller ones. It had the heart lattices up on the second floor. And that's where he would go have the virgins brought to him, and he'd have his way with them. Yeah. And then either would behead them or throw them off of the balcony and kill them. And then he put a heart up there to remember them. I'm just like, what kind of sick man does that? And, the other victory over Iran, I think, is the other palace where he did the Disneyland ride to appease his children after he killed their fathers. It's just like, he's just a sick, and all the water that was diverted, almost killed all the people in the country for 3 days with no water. Yeah. And he put it around his palaces. So, because he believed Allah couldn't see all his wickedness that he did if they were surrounded by water. And I'm like, you don't think your God could just look down at you? Yeah. But,
No, he was a twisted fuck, no doubt about it. The stories that we had heard, leading up to it and just seeing the opulence with which his palace was constructed, for me was hard to take in. Yeah. It was of biblical proportion. In terms of the intricacy, of stonework and marble detail and carvings and the size of it and he had them everywhere. Yeah. Just between how brutal he was and how twisted he was with, the way that he dealt with people and whatever, it's just, it was a strange, but unique time to be there, to witness some of that. Right. No doubt about it. But,
the palace on Camp Marc Lee, my first trip, I got to go to Camp Marc Lee in Ramadi, and one of the palaces there Were you ever at Camp Marc Lee?
I've not been.
So there's, again, just one of his smaller palaces, 2 or maybe 3-story. But the guys cut out the cornerstone of that building and brought it back to me.
No way.
It's got Saddam's initials on it.
Oh,
I'm like,
awesome.
take that, sucker.
So I mean, I didn't realize that you'd been to Iraq twice. I mean, that's some OG Mama Lee shit right there.
Yeah, I'm actually, I don't have it confirmed yet, but it looks like I'm going to be in Afghanistan for Christmas.
No way.
Yeah.
Well, that's awesome.
You know, I figure most people don't have the opportunity or the connections to be able to do that.
Yeah.
You know, who better to go over on behalf of all the other family members in America that can't do that and love on our troops and kind of bring a piece of America to them.
Yeah.
So.
No, I agree. I'm now hearing about the 2 trips. Can you expound on them a little bit in terms of when they were and what all you did in terms of
sure.
Working with the troops?
First trip I went over Christmas 2007 and was there for 2 weeks. So left just at the beginning of 2008. Well, collected 226,000 Christmas cards for the troops in the different tours I'd done across the United States. Obviously, I can't carry 226,000 in my suitcases. Yeah. So we shipped most of them to the different bases in Afghanistan and Iraq. And then I personally took 10,000 of them and handed them out. I went in that trip as an embedded reporter was how I got in. But
that's great.
We're embedded with the 1st to the 4th Cav. That's when I went out on patrol in the Dora neighborhoods 3 different times. And I wasn't fired on when we were out there. Yeah. We could have been, but wasn't. We did have a missile go over the base one night, and I remember actually it happened twice. The first time that it happened, and of course I'm laying in bed, and I've always wondered what some of those people thought when they're like, "Well, what's this woman?" Yeah. What's Mark's mom doing over in the combat zone? Does she have a death wish? No, I didn't have a death wish. Literally, I just wanted to go love on the troops and thank them, on behalf of all the other Americans that couldn't. But as I'm laying in bed and, my little silk pajamas, and I felt the explosion literally on my face. You could feel it. And you've felt these, but for a civilian, I was just like, wow. Yeah. And I'm like, okay, what do we do? And so I grabbed my, my body armor and my helmet, and I go stumbling out to the desk. I'm like, what do we do? Where do we go? What's happening? And they said it was just a controlled detonation. Don't worry about it. Of course, they're supposed to tell you. They're supposed to tell you before they do those. Yeah. So the next morning in the chow hall, I'm like, okay, so how do I know when it is real and when it's not? And so they gave me all the, what do they say first? They say all clear when it's not done. Now I don't remember what they tell you first.
I mean, I think it varies depending on what fob you're at.
Probably. But anyway, so I'm like, okay, I'm all ready. So then it happened again, and this time it was a real one, but somehow again they'd messed up, and so then there was the all clear when it was done. That one I just stayed sleeping. And I remember getting off the plane when we were at BIOP, and again, the first trip, I'd never been in a combat zone before. And as we're landing, it's at night and we're doing that corkscrew. My background's aerospace science. I know how planes land. I know how they crash. Yeah. When you do the corkscrew thing, that means you're probably, coming close to your
coming
planes
out
of But they obviously do that. So the enemy can't determine, the flight path and shoot the planes all down as they come in. But I get a little motion sickness. And so as we're coming down, I'm, in this, military plane and with all these other brave warriors, and I'm like, it's gonna be so embarrassing if I get sick on this plane. I didn't. I held it together, but I was feeling pretty bad. And I've learned that fix on the horizon, that helps. Well, it's dark, or there's no windows in this plane. There's one way up front, a small one, but I didn't know if we were close to landing. Yeah. We land, get off the plane, and again, there's explosions going on like crazy. I'm like, I'm in the combat zone. I knew this, is probably what it's like. Yeah. Again, there was the controlled detonations that they do at the end of the base when they find the IEDs and bring them back and blow them all up. And so I said I could have been like Hillary Clinton going, I got in the combat zone. I was running. But it was an amazing opportunity. Got to go to Camp Marc Lee. That's 2007. So Ramadi was still pretty bad. I didn't go out on patrol there, but I did check in, with my boys, my Mark's teammates from Charlie Platoon. Those, are really my kids now. And I said, I don't have a death wish. This is a really stupid idea for me to be going over there. And they're like, no, Mama Lee, as long as you fly everywhere you go, don't do ground transportation. Yeah. So we got there, and it had been 2 days travel trying to get over there. And I hadn't slept in 2 days, and I was exhausted. And they flew us from BIOP up to the green zone, which there's not much distance. I think it's only like 5 miles maybe between BIOP and the green zone. But again, because, ground transportation was bad. And we were waiting to get our media credentials. And I remember them coming in saying, it's probably going to take a couple days. I'm like, oh, good. I think I could sleep for a couple days. And I just been asleep about an hour and was in a dead sleep. Oh my gosh, that sleep was so good. And they came in and woke me up. They said, your ride's here, that we've got an MREP that's going to pick you up. They just dropped someone off at the hospital and they're going back to their fob. And I'm like, oh, wait, that's ground transportation.
Yeah.
I'm like, I can't go. Excuse me, I'm Mark's mom, and you need to fly me. I'm like, this is a combat zone. Our resources need to be there for our veterans.
Yeah.
If that's good enough for them, it's good enough for me.
Yeah.
And got in, and of course, is it Eid? Is the holiday over there?
Yeah, something like that. I mean,
But it was that holiday, and they were shooting their guns off to celebrate. Well, I don't know any different, so I'm in the MRAP hearing all the fire, and I'm going, okay. But it was an amazing opportunity that I'll never forget.
Yeah.
And to be able to go to Camp Marc Lee, that base that was named, and see the sign, brought back some of the soil from the base of Camp Marc Lee.
Yeah.
See where he slept, see where he walked, where he worked out.
Yeah.
Took me to the top of the palace there, and they said when Mark was really, contemplative and thinking deeply, lots of times he'd go up there, especially if there's full moon, not right in the beginning because they were still getting fired on a lot there, but and that night it was a full moon that I was there, and the Tigris and the Euphrates are right in there, and it was beautiful. The lighting, I mean, obviously it's not the most beautiful country over there, but and I felt like I connected with Mark up there when he would have been up there one night doing that, but.
Yeah, it was, so I mean, to me, that's one of the things that I'm thinking about in hearing you describe this is that, so few Gold Star parents, I mean, almost none of them, frankly, have the opportunity to go visit where they lost their kids, and unlike children or parents losing their kids, say here in the States, where, if it's a car accident or whatever, it's a little easier to kind of quantify or rationalize that or whatever. And I'm curious, especially, being there and walking on the same ground and being in the same area, but also to me, there's a stark contrast between people that die from either diseases or accidents or whatever versus, somebody that gives their life fighting for this country. So. Like there just is.
Very much so.
And so I can't help but think or wonder, what was going through your mind, especially walking around, like thinking this is what it was like with him walking. Can you kind of describe what was going through your head?
Definitely gave me a different perspective of, in my mind, what I thought it was like or what was going on. I think it very much... It gave me that visual. Mm-hmm. So, now when I look back at pictures of Mark or when I talk to his buddies about it, I can see where they were at. Yeah. I know where they were walking. I know what they were doing. I know what equipment was in the gym. I don't know what it was like when they went in at, a battle.
Yeah.
I wore the body armor. I went out on patrol. I got a glimpse of it as a civilian could, but I still have no clue what you guys go through. But it gave me a deeper understanding. I remember when we were at Fob Falcon and been out on patrol that first day, and I was in the office and was writing some stuff to remember, what we saw. And they had done a briefing with us the night before we went out, and literally a year before, it looked like a ghost town.
Yeah.
There were no shops open. Nobody was walking on the streets. No cars. It was dead.
Yeah.
And when we were out there, the kids were playing. The park was open. Different businesses were open. And so when I got back and I was writing about it and I asked the guy, what was the name of that street again? He goes, I don't know. I've never left the fob. And that's when the Army was doing 15-month rotations. And they were getting ready to go home. I'm like, you never left the fob ever?
Yeah.
He goes, no, I'm support. I do stuff in the office.
Yeah.
And somehow in my mind, I really thought that it didn't matter. I knew people have different things they do, but I thought probably part of that, you always rotated out and did patrols somewhere, sometime.
Yeah.
And so that gave me that perspective for what different people do as well.
Sure.
Parents will say, oh my gosh, my kid's going to Kuwait. I'm so worried. I'm like, there's nothing going on. Not that there something could start, but Kuwait, there's no.
Yeah, I mean, they have
they drive like idiots.
Yeah, I mean,
you got to be careful because you could die in a car accident over there.
I was just going to say, you're more likely to die in a car accident with the way they drive over there than
that was crazy.
Than anything else. But
and then I went back in 2010. Nobody was going outside of the wire. I was embedded with the 321st AEW, which is the Aviation Expeditionary Wing. And they were helping the Iraqi Air Force rebuild because they'd lost everything in the beginning. And so got to actually meet a lot of the officers there when we did the change of command. And a lot of the Americans had gotten pretty close, not just working relationship, but gotten pretty close with a lot of the Iraqis. So we did the change of command together. But when I was there, I had asked General Anwar, who was there, I don't know how many stars that was for them over there, but he was setting up the Iraqi army. And I asked several questions of him. And the last question I asked, and I'm glad it was the last one, I said, I don't think the mainstream media has done a good job of portraying what's really going on over here. If you could say one thing to the American people, what would you tell them? And he kind of hesitated, and you could see him swallow hard and the lump go down his throat. And he said, we will tell our children, we will tell our grandchildren, we will tell our great-grandchildren, there's American blood that's poured out on our soil. And you didn't hear that on the news, you know?
Yeah.
And obviously for me, that's personal. That's my son's blood that he's talking about there. And to have that opportunity to hear that, to see all the Iraqi people when I went out on patrol that loved Americans and, you know, were grateful for what we were doing over there.
Yeah.
You know, obviously we see the media and, you know, the journalism is not what it used to be, where they give you the facts and then you develop your own opinion. You know, it's opinion pieces anymore.
Let me
It's
tell
not
you
really
your
journalism.
opinion, and then you can figure out if it's factual or not.
Exactly. And so I knew that there was definitely a slant, you know, before I went over. But you know, and again, being the first Gold Star mom in history to be in the combat zone where my son died.
Yeah.
You know,
how did
you didn't hear that on the news either.
No.
But yet Cindy Sheehan was on the news all the time dishonoring her son. You know, I was like,
Yeah. How did you pull the second trip off? Same embedded reporter thing, or was there a different?
No, that one, well, was sort of an embedded reporter, but I got to know General Petraeus pretty well, and so I just reached out to him, and they're like, get her over there.
Yeah, that's such a neat experience. I mean, the only thing I can think is that it, both from a closure standpoint and from kind of filling in a lot of the blanks, you know, adding a lot of pieces that were missing from the puzzle of understanding, you know, where it happened and how it went down and what that environment's like, that had to be extremely helpful, I would think.
Well, and a lot of people have asked me that about the closure, and I don't feel like that really changed anything by being there or not being there.
Yeah.
And I think that obviously, so we have to be very careful, you know, if we take other Gold Star families over there, because you don't know how they're going to react.
Sure.
You know, there's a lot of them. We've worked with families through our foundation, you know, for the last 12 years, and grief is a dissector, you know, and a lot of families don't process through the grief and they get stuck in it. And then you could have someone over there
that's having a breakdown.
Yeah,
or, you know,
that's going to be another problem, or, you know, tries to do something stupid and grabs a weapon and tries to have revenge, or, you know, you don't know what somebody's going to do.
Yeah.
And I think that was part of, because I had been working with the military up through that. I had been already supporting our fallen SEALs, their families. I had been supporting, you know, our wounded SEALs who'd come in. So they knew how I was going to respond and that would be okay. But, you know, if that can't, you know, and that's part of our foundation, anything that we can do to help these families in the grieving process to bring them back to that healthy side. They will never be who they were before their loved one passed.
Sure.
Same thing with you guys. You'll never be that warrior you were before you went over to combat.
Yeah.
But whatever we can do to support you guys and those families that fall through our programs to process through that grief, to begin that healing journey, you know, that's what we're all about.
Yeah. No, I agree. I mean, I think it, and we'll get into the nuts and bolts of America's Mighty Warriors here in a minute. One thing that I think is important for the listener out there, that, you know, whether you have military ties or not, is in terms of understanding the magnitude of loss that exists, you know, when a parent loses a child. I mean, it's not, you know, you hear, whether it's an adage or just kind of a consistent mentality in our society is, you know, parents aren't supposed to bury their kids. And I would appreciate, and I know listeners would appreciate, if you can tell us, you know, if you can walk us through that day where you found out, and if you can, try to put that into words.
Yeah. Obviously, toughest day of my life. As I'd mentioned, I've been a widow for 24 years, so I'd walked through the death of a husband. I'd walked through grief before. And I wrote in my journal 2 weeks after he died, after my husband died, what's wrong with me? Why am I still crying? Why have things not gone back to normal? I had no clue the process, the time that it takes to grieve. So at least when I lost Mark, I knew that grief was a process, and I knew this was going to be much harder than losing my husband. But Mark actually died in the morning, and they were trying to locate me up in Oregon, which is where I raised my kids, and I'd moved during Mark's not during his deployment, during his time in the teams. I had moved down to Arizona. He'd visited me there several times. I know he had called to confirm the address before he deployed when he was working on the paperwork again, so I know they had the right address. But they had been looking for me for about 8 hours up in Oregon. And we kind of lived outside of a small town, and finally one of the neighbors came home from work, and they said, well, she doesn't live here anymore. She lives in Arizona. And I still owned the building up there, but at the time the building was empty. And so they had sent typically, and we've perfected things in the SEAL community, how we do the notifications. We've gotten more experience at it, which I wish we didn't have. Yeah. But because they were afraid I was going to hear on the news about 8 hours had gone by already. And so they just sent the local Navy, CACO officer over. And I wasn't home. I was actually at my Bible study that night. And so they had waited for a little while, and then they went and knocked on my neighbor's door and said, do you know how to get a hold of Debbie? And she said, well, I don't have her cell phone, but I know her son works at Lowe's. And so they called Christopher, my son, there, and he'd served in the military. He knew, they show up at your house. If they're wounded, they'll call you and try to get you to them. And they wouldn't tell him, but they didn't need to tell him. So he called me, and we were actually celebrating my birthday at my small group. And we hadn't met the week before, which, as I mentioned before, was my birthday. And my girlfriend had given me one of the willow tree angels, and that's the wooden angels with the wire wings. And she said, and each one has a different character quality, and the one she gave me was courage. And she said, you just remind me of such a woman of courage with all you've been through in your life, and how you're still positive, and you still serve God. And so when he called, I answered my phone. There was nothing in his voice to alarm or alert me. He wasn't speaking too fast. He wasn't crying. He wasn't urgent, screaming, yelling. And he just said, hey, Mom, where are you? I said, well, it's Wednesday night. I'm a small group. Why? What's up? And he said, how long will it take you to get home? And I thought, well, that's kind of an odd question. I don't know, 5 minutes, 7 minutes. Why? What's up? And he said, you just need to come home. And I knew it was going to face me when I got home. And I jumped in my car, and there was a song from my past. And it said, I put my hope in you, O Lord, trusting you, I will not be shaken, knowing that you will see me through. I put my hope in you. And I just sang that song over and over and over. And I got to the main intersection by my house, and there was probably 3 or 4 fire trucks and 3 or 4 ambulances and police cars. The whole intersection was blocked off. And as I pulled up on that intersection, I thought, my house blew up. That's all that's wrong. My house blew up. And I would much rather have lost all of my earthly possessions and still had Mark. And to this day, I have no idea, I guess in the shock and the stress of it all, somehow I found a way to get in my subdivision, but I couldn't tell you how I did that. And there were no more emergency vehicles. So I came back to knowing what was going to face me when I got home. And I turned the corner on my street expecting the black car to be parked out front. And there was no black car. There were no unusual cars. My son Christopher was there just pacing, back and forth on the sidewalk. And I parked there and I got out. And he said, Mom, the Navy's here. And I remember just falling on his shoulder and just crying, saying, no, no. And we walked inside, and they'd been in my home for about an hour because they'd been trying to find me. I guess I can be kind of elusive and hard to find at times. But they said, we can tell by being in your home that you're a woman of faith, and you're going to need to rely on that faith for what we're about to tell you. Your son, Marc Lee, has been killed in action. And as a parent, that's the toughest words that you could ever hear. And yet, at that moment, I still knew that God was going to see me through. I had confidence He'd seen me through that before. He would get me through it again. And to this day, I mean, you never forget that impact. You never forget those words. And we sat down and we were trying to process, what had happened. And I remember sitting, and there I had a long window next to my door, and looking out. My friends from my Bible study had followed me home, because when I left, I said, something's not wrong. Please be praying. And so they'd followed me home, and I looked at them. I'm like, what are you doing out there? Get inside. And I motioned to them. I said, I need you in here. And as we, talked about Mark and tried to process it, and we cried and prayed and cried and cried. And when the guys knew in Iraq that I'd been notified, then I started getting calls from them. And we started to piece together the story of, what Mark had done. And we learned that it was 115, 120 degrees in Ramadi that day, and they'd been fighting a tense fight for 2 hours. And Mark's one of the main characters portrayed in the movie American Sniper, and that scene, is in there when Ryan's on the rooftop and gets shot. And the guys say that didn't even come close to portraying it. But I live in Phoenix. Sometimes it's 115, 120 degrees.
Yeah.
But we're not carrying, weapons or, our body armor. We're in our air-conditioned houses or in our swimming pools. And Mark carried the big gun, so he carried anywhere from 150 to 180 pounds. How you do that for 2 hours in that extreme temperature is beyond me. I mean, you guys are all just wired differently. You can do things that seem superhuman at times. But I know you guys. You're just as real, as you or I are. And yes, you're wired differently. You're much stronger than any of us are, but you're in battle, and trying to deal with that stuff. And so when Ryan got shot, there were 4 SEALs that were up there on that rooftop, and he quickly fell to the ground, and 2 of the other SEALs did that very same thing. Mark could have made that choice to do that same thing, but his choice was to stand up in the line of fire right where Ryan had just got shot. He carried the big gun. He knew he could lay down some suppressive fire. But there was no medic that was there, so he knew he needed to do that to get the medic up there. And the medic took one look at Ryan as he got up there and said, we got to get him out of here immediately, or there's no chance for survival. So then a second time, Mark did the very same thing by himself, stood up in the line of fire, hoping that he could lay down that suppressive fire so everybody could get down off the roof. And they did. They sent Ryan off for medical attention, and they climbed in their Bradleys, and they headed back to that base that I mentioned earlier that was named after Mark. And they started to rip their gear off, and they were trying to process what had just happened. Ryan was bad. They didn't think he was going to survive at all. They figured he'd probably died already at that point. I remember Chris Kyle telling me that later. As they ripped off their gear and got some water to refresh themselves, the chief came in. He said, we just found 30 of these insurgents that just attacked us. And without hesitation, Mark looked at his chief and he said, Roger that, let's go get him. That base, because I've been there, I know on the other side of Shark Base, Camp Marc Lee, there's a Marine base. They could have sent word over there and said, hey, we need some Marines that are fresh and haven't been out of battle today. But that's not who you guys are. And so they went back into Ramadi. They cleared several houses, and they went in the last house that Mark would be in. And they cleared the bottom of the house, and they proceeded up the steps, and they heard Mark yell, on me. And you know what he was saying. He was saying, I got the lead on this. You guys follow me. And as they went up those steps, they drew fire through a window. And for the last and final time, Mark made the choice to stand into that line of fire. He didn't duck below the wall. He didn't say, hey, we need backup here, and let his guys all behind him get killed. He made the choice to stand there and give his life for his teammates. And that trickles down to us. That's the freedoms that we enjoy every day that are paid for. And that's why, for me, that dedication to serve you, to serve the team guys, to serve every branch of the military, I'm passionate about making sure that I thank them and shake their hand and look in their eye and let them know I love and appreciate them and the sacrifice that they've made. And there probably isn't anything I wouldn't do for our men and women who serve and for our families of our fallen. And it's through the struggles, it's through the fire, it's through the tragedies in life that the strength and the character and the fortitude's built. It's not in the easy times. It's not when you're, floating on your mat in your pool or, sipping your margaritas. It's in those tough times that's when the character is built and tested.
Yeah. I can't thank you enough for sharing that. and your composure in being able to do so is impressive. I wouldn't have been able to do it. I'll tell you that. I'm glad I didn't have to talk during that. I'll just say that. Your ability to communicate that is one that I, again, can't thank you enough for sharing, because I think, the listener, especially if there's not, a lot of ties to military or first responders or whatever, is to understand the mentality and the camaraderie and the, just the overall level of sacrifice that a lot of our guys go through to accomplish the mission and ultimately get the job done. So I really appreciate you sharing that. Tough.
Yeah, it's difficult. I've never once, as many times as I've shared it, never once does it get rote. It's still.
Yeah. Well, it shows.
It
comes from the soul, no doubt about it. So again, thank you. One of the things I don't know how to ask this any other way than just kind of trying to synopsize. What does being a Gold Star mother mean to you?
Well, it definitely wasn't ever anything I wanted to be or aspired to be. None of us do. It's a club that no one wants to join, and trust me, we're not recruiting for new members.
Yeah.
But to know that history was changed because of my son, that's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Would I rather selfishly have him back and have history not changed? Of course.
Yeah.
But I get to see, and I don't exaggerate that when I say millions and millions of lives have been changed by Marc, by his letter, by his story that's been shared, by what we're doing at our foundation.
Yeah.
That wouldn't have happened if Marc would have still been here.
Yeah.
And there are prices that are paid for our freedom, and our world is a world that needs to be changed. We're not perfect. There is evil in this world that we need to stand against. And that we have warriors like you, like Marc, like those that are listening, whether it's our first responders, our military, that'll stand in harm's way for us. That's pretty overwhelming, And to know that I had the gift, God could have picked anybody else to be that young man's mama.
Yeah.
And I got the blessing to be able to do that. It's, I don't know that you say it's an honor to be a Gold Star, because like I said, you don't want to be one. But to know that my kid was one of the kids that's changed, not just America, but changed the world and the history of this world.
Yeah.
It's an honor to be his mama. Maybe that's what it's an honor to be his mom, not so much a Gold Star mom.
Yeah. No, it resonates incredibly powerfully, and it makes a lot of sense. Mm-hmm. You're an amazing advocate for I think the community of Gold Star parents, for nonprofits that help our veterans, and I think you do a fantastic job of eloquently communicating, that sacrifice and the importance of the support on your guys' end. Is there something that you wish that everybody knew about Gold Star parents that they don't, that you find yourself having to kind of explain?
Well, just what a Gold Star is.
Yeah.
I remember doing a radio interview, and obviously the guy hadn't done his research before he had me on, but he said, "We want to welcome Debbie Lee, a Gold Star mother. Congratulations on being a Gold Star." I'm like, okay, this is not the charts that you put out for your kids when they do something good and you get the little Gold Star and put it on there.
Yeah.
I didn't know what a Gold Star was till I became one. So I think just people understanding what a Gold Star family is. Yeah. When you see that Gold Star hanging in my window, that flag, with the banner and the Gold Star on it, what does that mean? Yeah. When you see that flag flying in, my backyard, what does that mean? What is a Gold Star family?
Yeah.
And that to know that we need to always remember them and not forget them.
Yeah.
So if you know Gold Star families in your community, reach out to them. Stop by and just say, "Can I give you a hug?" Drop off a loaf of bread. Mow their lawn, help them out. If it's been, like me now, it's been 12 years.
Yeah.
We just don't ever want anybody to forget. And that's the same theme I hear over and over from all the Gold Star families we worked with.
Yeah.
So do things to honor and remember their fallen hero.
Yeah.
Let them know. I think sometimes people are afraid. They don't know what to say, what not to say. Do I talk about it? Do I not talk about it? And everybody grieves differently, so you don't always know what they want to do.
Yeah.
But just being there gives them that opportunity. Then if they want to talk about it, they can talk about it.
True.
But I think just letting them know, you'll never forget. I'm a contributing author in 4 different books, and when I autograph those books, I autograph it, live your life worthy of their sacrifices.
Yeah.
And so I think as Americans, that's what we owe, not just the Gold Star, but any of our veterans that have served. We do have an obligation for the freedoms that have been paid for by you guys, by the fallen. We have an obligation to live our life worthy of that sacrifice.
Yeah. Well, that's a perfect way to, or a perfect point to bring up to segue into what you're doing now in terms of making that not just a passion and something you feel strongly about, but turning it into your life's work, really, which is transitioning from that grieving process into the founder and CEO of America's Mighty Warriors. And just for the listener, where I met Debbie was at Sturgis 4 years ago now, which is a funny place for us to have met. But the Buffalo Chip, who I'd love to publicly thank. Greg and the entire staff of the Buffalo Chip, they've been bringing a handful of veterans charity groups there and rolling out the red carpet and raising a ton of money throughout the week of Sturgis for Warrior Dog Foundation, America's Mighty Warriors, and Combat Wounded Coalition. And so it's kind of a strange place for us to have crossed paths, but we've known each other for a little over 4 years now, and I'd love for you to kind of describe the process of focusing that passion and grieving process, and all culminating into creating America's Mighty Warriors, and then explain kind of what you guys do also.
Yeah, it's not like I woke up one day and said, "Oh, I'm going to start a nonprofit."
Yeah.
Again, because we were early in the grieving process and the loss in the SEAL community, we weren't as experienced back then. Mark's teammates were still all deployed. They were still in the combat zone.
Yeah.
There was not another Gold Star mother that was there at the funeral that says, "Hey, I'm going to walk along this with you. Here's my phone number. Call me if you need me, want to cry, scream, yell, whatever, any time of the day or night." There wasn't anybody there. So I'm kind of walking through this process by myself, trying to figure it out. And then about 7 weeks later, Mike Mansour was killed, and he was on Delta platoon. So Mark was Charlie. Delta was his sister platoon, which makes up Task Unit Bruiser. And I knew I needed to be there. That was about the same time Mark's teammates were coming home. I wanted to be there and welcome them home, not to be seen as, "Oh, there's poor Mark's mom," but to say, "Yay, the rest of my boys are home." Yeah. And so I decided to go over there. I didn't know what I was going to do. I didn't have a plan and say, "Okay, I'm going to take them this. I'm going to give this book to them. I'm going to," I was just going to go be there. And when we got there, it was the same hotel where they put them up, where we just stayed for Mark's funeral. The vehicles that came to pick him up were the same black SUVs. I don't know the exact car, but same looking car. And as I was down there and the family started to get in the car, someone from the command came up to me and said, "We want you in that car with the family." I'm like, "Oh, no. This is not about me. This is not about Mark. I'm here to support this family." And they said, "Exactly. That's why we want you in the car." And so I got in the car, and as we pulled up to Fort Rosecrans after the service, same casket, same place we'd just been for Mark. Only difference now was I knew what it was like to get that folded flag. And I remember getting out of it and just feeling like my scar is just, I'd started to heal, not much, but I started the healing process, and I just felt like it might have been ripped wide open again. But I knew I didn't want them to go through it alone. And so that's where it started, and then I would just happen to be in Washington, D.C. I live in Arizona. You don't just happen to be in Washington, D.C.
I was in the neighborhood.
Yeah, I just went out for coffee and took a wrong turn. Although coming here, I saw Paris was just down the road.
Yeah, it's right up the street.
We'd have a wounded. Jay Redmond was one of them. I just happened to be in Washington, D.C. when he was flown in, and would be there and just support them, support the families. Again, I didn't have a plan, but in my heart, I talked earlier about, that's who I am. I'd always been one, if someone had a baby, I'd take meals, or there was a funeral, I'd go support the families. So, and then I did that for probably about 2 years out of my own pocket. And then pretty soon I'm like, okay, I'm not a wealthy woman. I can't keep this up. And other people had encouraged me to start a foundation. So that's when I started the foundation. It was in 2008, but had been doing it since 7 weeks after Marc died. The name of the foundation, the meaning of the name Marc means mighty warrior. And it's not just about Marc. It's about every man and woman who served. And that's why our foundation is America's Mighty Warriors. And it started just doing those things that I talked about, supporting in the SEAL community, those families. And then Marc's amazing last letter home talked about doing more random acts of kindness, how we could change our world. So I'm like, oh, what a cool way to honor Marc, by doing those random acts of kindness that he talked about. He says, the last time you paid for a stranger's cup of coffee or meal or tank of gas? So we started doing those little things. Since then, the program has increased we do up to a $5,000 grant. Typically, that's crisis situations, although it doesn't have to be. We had early on a veteran, amputee, I think it was his leg, got married just before he deployed, never had a honeymoon, so we helped, cover the cost of their honeymoon to Hawaii. But typically it's, someone's child has cancer and is dying, or their house is just burnt to the ground, or, something like that where we can step in and help. The veterans themselves can't come ask for help because unfortunately we've found there's a lot of veterans with a you owe me everything mentality and just go from charity to see what they can get. Yeah. And typically the ones that need help won't come ask. Yeah. And so if you knew somebody, you could reach out and say, hey, Mama Lee, this is the circumstance. Here's what's going on. That helps us vet them. Yeah. And then we still do that process. Yeah. Then we started doing about 5 years ago a lot with our veterans with post-traumatic stress and traumatic brain injury. We're paying for hyperbaric oxygen therapy. And it's actually healing the brain, not just helping with the symptoms. We're doing hormone and vitamin therapy. The medic that was with Marc when he died, Kevin Lace, is now out and is a physician's assistant. And that's where he focuses on. So we do a lot with him. And then we pay for travel costs to a program called Mighty Oaks, which is a retreat in California that actually the SEAL community is doing a lot of referrals there. But our philosophy is let's do natural things that restore their health. Let's not send them to the VA, give them drugs. And I know there are good VAs, but a lot of them have issues.
Yeah, there's more bad than good for sure.
And I feel like the mentality, I can't tell you how many gallon-sized baggies filled with prescription drugs veterans have brought to me. Yeah. That's it. I'm supposed to take these. Yeah. So is this over the years they've given you? No, this is 1 month's prescription. I'm like, oh my gosh. Yeah. And 2/3 of them, the side effect says may cause suicidal tendency. And we wonder why our suicide rate's so high. Yeah. So if we can get them off those drugs, if we can heal the brains, not just mask the symptoms, and we've had an amazing outcome with that. Excuse me. We, for our Gold Star families, we have a house called the Heroes Hope Home in Arizona. And that's where our families of the fallen can come stay for free. And we just love on them and let them know. We'll never forget when they get there, they get gift baskets, and there's chocolates and balloons and flowers and things in there for them. And then we've got a gift basket with gift cards for manicures, pedicures, massages, meals, sporting events. So that whole week, it's just a way to love on them and let them know we'll never forget their hero and we won't forget them. Yeah. I'm actually here in Texas this week because we do retreats down here twice a year. The one that kicks off tomorrow will have 14 families arriving. This is our combined, so it's our Purple Heart recipients, their immediate family, and then our Gold Star families, which includes the parents, the siblings and their family, the spouses, and the children. So we try to impact that whole family in that way. And then we do a lot of advocacy and education. So if there's an injustice, we'll try to step in and make that right. Yeah. Use our voices to educate people as to the sacrifices that you guys make for those freedoms that we enjoy every day and most of us take for granted. Yeah.
It's amazing work. One of the things that I know we had talked about just a few weeks ago at Sturgis was the hyperbaric treatment for TBIs and PTS symptoms. And I would love if you can, not that we're all a bunch of scientists sitting around here, but if you can go a little further into that process, because I know, we've all had, a number of friends that we've lost to, to PTSD and or depression or a combination of the two. And after the fact, finding out that an enormous contributing factor, or two of them, is some sort of brain injury, and then it's compounded by a lot of the, psychotropic or antidepressant medications that actually make things worse. And so, to me, I love hearing about a process that is. I mean, it's essentially completely natural in terms of it's there's no drugs, there's no surgery. It's just, can you talk a little bit more about that? What that process is and what it does, and then also I'd love if you could share one or two of the success stories of guys that after the 30 days. Just walk us through that whole process.
Sure. So the treatment involves 40 consecutive treatments. You go in the hyperbaric chamber, which a lot of people are familiar with those for divers. When they get the bends, they go in these chambers and bring their oxygen levels back up. And so this is the same thing. The pressurization can be set at different levels for different things, but the basic, in the research they've done through the years, the basic treatment is 40 treatments. You go in the chamber for an hour each day. It's the pressurization of the oxygen. It's not like you can just sit here and take deeper breaths and go, It's meditate. Because the pressurization of it intensifies the depth that it can go into the cells.
Yeah.
Oxygen is a natural healer. I mean, you think about your wounds on the outside. The reason we cover them is so they don't get infected, but the oxygen, if it's not covered, will heal it quicker than other things will. As they go in there, it compounds itself each day. So the day after day after day, that's why it's consecutive treatments, then your impact is even greater. We had a Navy SEAL who retired probably about a year and a half ago, who just went through treatment. And I'll have to see, if I can find the picture to show you. I might have showed you up at Sturgis.
You did, yeah. It was astounding, the progress.
Absolutely amazing. We did a brain scan, a SPECT scan, before he went in. Sorry.
No,
and then after the 40 treatments. He went to a facility where he stayed there for the month. And then he did 2 treatments a day. So it was only, 4 weeks of treatment while he was down there. There has to be at least 4 hours in between so you don't get oxygen toxicity. But there are no side effects. Yeah. It's not like Yeah. It's one of the best things that can be done. We are working with the VA to try to make this standard of care. If they had chambers in the combat zone, and as soon as you guys were breaching or been in explosions or even training with what you guys go through, then you guys wouldn't be coming back with a lot of these issues. A lot of the issues are the frontal lobe where the damage is at. Yeah. But as you looked at that SPECT scan that I showed you, you saw the before and after, and the brain's kind of mangled, and you can see all the holes in the missing parts.
Yeah.
And afterwards, it's filled.
It reminded me of like a body shop, like a car that's wrecked and everything's all that's fucking dented and whatever, and using magnets and the ability to pull them out and make what was, looked like it's been microwave cheese to something that's brand new and completely refreshed. And I mean, it was astounding to me, and I know, that technology needs to be much more prevalent. And I think it would, make a significant impact in terms of helping a lot of veterans who succumb to suicide, not have that happen. And I would love to see that, be a more standardized level of care across the board.
I agree. We actually, I had them in my home. They stopped and visited 2 weeks ago when they were in town for a wedding. And I was able to, just pick his brain and say, okay, typically the first week, so many of the veterans struggling with PTS and TBI, they don't sleep well. I don't know how many I've had say, how much do you sleep each night? 3 hours.
Yeah.
How long you been doing that? I don't know, 5 years, 10 years? I'm like, okay, you would not want to be around me. I can guarantee it. If I only had 3 or 4 hours sleep every night, I would be frustrated. I wouldn't be thinking well. I'd be agitated. And that's why they struggle with, a lot of those things. The headaches. Yeah. So that first week, people are like, oh my gosh, I slept 8 hours solid last night. That's the first time in, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. My headaches are gone. If I had a headache and not sleeping, you really would not want to be around me. And you can see why people just lose it, because they're on the edge. Our bodies aren't designed to go with no sleep and have a headache all the time.
Oh, it's detrimental, yeah.
The memory issues. So when this SEAL came and visited me, he shared a lot how much better he was doing in all the different ways. And then he said, you made me a SEAL again. And obviously that's the community that I love very dearly. And there could not be a higher compliment. I heard what he was saying. I had this thought process. I had this determination before. I had this person who I was, and I wasn't that person anymore.
Yeah.
And you've made me back to that warrior that I was. Not that he's saying he wants to go back into combat, but that what we're doing as a foundation can restore that.
Yeah. Yeah, there's no better compliment.
I mean, yeah, exactly. That's just like, oh man. And I was like, I wish we just had that on on sound or camera, what you just said. And he is going to be doing some stuff for us there.
Yeah.
But if we can restore a piece close to who you guys were before you left, we owe that to you as a nation. This is our responsibility. You signed the line and said, I will give up to the price of my life if need be.
Yeah.
And some were required of that, like my son Mark. But the ones that are back, we can still help you guys.
Yeah.
And that's our responsibility as a nation. And that's not something, that I can do alone. We need a vast army surrounding us to help us do that. I've got those connections, know where to refer people to the doctors, get them that help, do the follow-up. But we need people helping us not just raise those funds, but get the word out to these veterans that are struggling.
I mean, to me, you ought to run the VA, honestly. Or whoever's running the VA needs to have your mentality, because it gets talked about, but it's bullshit.
Yeah.
I mean, you can tell it's going through the motions and whatever. And to me, that's one of the things that that pisses me off probably more than just about anything is the lack of level of care that exists in the VA. And I've dealt with some of it, certainly not on the scale that a lot of guys have, but enough for me to be pretty frustrated with it.
Yeah.
One thing that I was curious of, did the guy that you were talking about, the success story, was the VA or any other clinic, did he have any proposed or attempted treatment prior to that didn't work? Or
I think he tried a few, but a lot of you guys, being in the SEALs and Special Forces, you don't want to admit that there's issues or things that you need help with.
Yeah.
And because I have known them for a while, and he's seen what we're doing, and I, lovingly would plug away and say, hey, we can get you some help here.
Yeah.
And finally, I think some of the issues then were being more evident to him that he was willing to say, okay, I'm ready.
Yeah.
So
significant enough.
That is not a weakness to say you need help.
I know it's tough.
Yeah,
but
I know it's tough.
Yeah.
I'm kind of hitting myself on the head sometimes.
I know it. So, other than everything that you've got going on now, like what now, or what moving into the future? Where do you see America's Mighty Warriors transitioning into the future in terms of growth or what have you? Well,
the last 4 years we've doubled every 2 years.
Yeah.
Our impact in the families that we've been able to help.
That's amazing.
And so I continue to see that to be a growth pattern. I would love, it may not be reality, but I would love to thank every veteran, whether it's over, the airwaves, speaking at Sturgis, giving them a handshake and passing out the thank you cards that we give to them. I mean, every veteran that served has paid for my freedoms, and I would like to have that opportunity to thank every one of them.
Yeah.
I would like to be able to help as many of them as we have the funding to. I would love to have the problem of tomorrow morning I get 100 emails from veterans who need help, who are struggling with post-traumatic stress or traumatic brain injury, and to say, oh, we don't have enough money to pay for everybody. That's a good problem to have. Then we work on raising those additional funds.
Yeah.
I would love for every Gold Star family member to know that they're loved, that they're appreciated, that they're not alone. And I think that's one of the things that I felt, and I told you kind of started this, was I felt so alone. I felt like nobody else could possibly understand what I was going through. And again, that may not happen, that I have that opportunity to do that, but that's my goal. I would love to be able to do that.
Yeah. One of the things, I don't know if you're aware of it, there's intermittent times throughout this interview where you grasp the trident necklace you have. Are you aware that you do that? Yeah. It's pretty neat for anybody that watches the YouTube video. It's a touching subconscious nonverbal communicator that I've noticed. It's pretty neat to see cool. In conjunction with what you're saying. But the two big questions is there a capability or a capacity that you're not currently offering that is a goal of yours that people can help with, to move in the future, or is it just to continue to do what you're doing at a larger scale? Or
well, I would like to eventually have our own retreat center. We are very blessed. Fellowship Church, which is a big mega church out of Dallas. It's their facility where they do their youth camp. Amazing facility, 1,000 acres. It's got zip line, kayaking, canoeing. One time I said waterboarding. It's paddle boarding.
Oh, come on down.
We're going to waterboard you.
The shit out of you.
The horseback riding. I mean, it's got like a mini water park. And so we're blessed to have them help us, sponsor that. But it's only available certain times. And so that really limits us when we can get that. So we would love to eventually, have our own retreat center.
You want to be able to waterboard year round.
Exactly. And nobody can come in and say anything. No. Yeah. That could be a facility where we could also combine what we're doing with post-traumatic stress, traumatic brain injury, where they can go on site, bring their families while they're getting treatment or something. Yeah. That would be awesome to be able to do that. My dream when I first started this was to have a cruise ship filled with just Gold Star families. Yeah. That once a year we do a cruise for them. And the wait staff is all either former military or patriots.
Be
all
careful
the entertainment.
With the booze on that trip.
Yeah. We'll just give them tickets and they can only have so many every day. Yeah. And have all the entertainments all patriotic, where it's just a really uplifting time to come together. So
that would be awesome. So Carnival, Norwegian, Princess.
If you're listening.
Any of you assholes out there that have any sway with them, why don't you give Mama Lee a call and hook her up with that. Where can the listener find you guys, and more importantly, how can they help?
So they can find us at Americas, and that's AMERICAS, Mighty, MIGHTY, Warriors, WARRIORS.org. Our office number is 623-537-5322. They can call us there as well. You can find us on Facebook, social media.
Is there a method with which donating is more beneficial or easier, or can you PayPal it? Can you do online donations?
You could do an online donation on our website. You can also call our office. We can run through Square. You can send us a check, P.O. Box 8114, Surprise, Arizona 85374. That doesn't take any funds out when you send it that way, but I know that's not always practical, and sometimes easier to do it now. Yeah. It's easy to do it that way.
So for everybody out there listening, Mama Lee has been through an amazing journey and an incredibly difficult one. And the fact that you have created this organization and done what you've done with it is inspiring. It's remarkable, and it's honorable is the best way I can even try to describe it. I can't thank you enough for doing that, and I know that you've changed thousands of people's lives, tens of thousands of people's lives in doing so. And so in true mic drop fashion, I'm telling you guys, I'm not asking you, go to America's Mighty Warriors and hook them up and help them out. Or you can choke yourself and then go do it for not doing it fast enough. But go to the website, support them, buy the T-shirts, tell everybody you know about them. It is an important mission, and one with which we all feel very passionately about, and want to see continue to grow and succeed the way that it has been. Last question I'm gonna ask before I want to wrap up with reading Marc's last letter home is, tell me something that you're grateful for.
I am grateful for the freedoms that we have here in America. I'm grateful for my family and grateful for my faith.
Well, amen. I always like to ask that of all the guests, because I think it's a good way to end on a positive note of appreciating something. And so I am going to show you my appreciation for the sacrifice that your son made. And my hope is that this podcast can at least in some way begin to do some of that justice. But one of the most prominent things and impacts that Marc had since his passing is the last letter home that he wrote, and it's very popular. It's inspired just truckloads of people, and I want to take a few brief moments here to read that before we finish. Glory is something that some men chase and others find themselves stumbling upon, not expecting it to find them. Either way, it is a noble gesture that one finds bestowed upon them. My question is, when does glory fade away and become a wrongful crusade, or an unjustified means by which consumes one completely? I have seen war. I have seen death. The sorrow that encompasses your entire being as a man breathes his last. I can only pray and hope that none of you will ever have to experience some of these things I have seen and felt here. I've felt fear and have felt adrenaline pump through my veins, making me seem invincible. I will be honest and say that some of the things I've seen here are unjustified and uncalled for. However, for the most part, we are helping this country. It will take more years than most expect, but we will get Iraq to stand on its own feet. Most of what I've seen here I will never really mention or speak of, only due to the nature of those involved. I have seen a man give his food to a hungry child and family. Today I saw a hospital that most of us would refuse to receive treatment from. The filth and smell would allow most of us not to be able to stand to enter, let alone get medicine from. However, you will be relieved to know that coalition forces have started to provide security for and supply medicine and equipment to help aid in the cause. I've seen amazing things happen here. However, I've seen the sad part of war too. I've seen the morals of a man who cares nothing of human life. I have seen hate towards a nation's people who has never committed a wrong except being born of a third world, ill-educated and ignorant to Western civilization. It is not everybody who feels this way, only a select few, but it brings questions to mind. Is it okay for one to consider themselves superior to another race? Surprising, we are not a stranger to this sort of attitude, meaning that in our own country we discriminate against someone for what nationality they are, their education level, their social status. We distinguish our role models as multi-million-dollar sports heroes or talented actors and actresses who complain about not getting millions of dollars more than they're currently getting paid. Our country is a great country. Don't get me wrong on this, otherwise none of us would be living there. My point of this is, how can we come over here and help a less than fortunate country without holding contempt or hate towards them if we can't do it in our country? I try to do my part over here, but the truth is, over there, the United States, I do nothing but take. Ask yourself, when was the last time you donated clothes that you hadn't worn out? When was the last time you paid for a random stranger's cup of coffee, meal, or maybe even a tank of gas? When was the last time you helped a person with groceries into or out of their car? Think to yourself and wonder what it would feel like if and when the bill for a meal came, you were told it was already paid for. More random acts of kindness like this would change our country and our reputation as a country. It is not unknown to most of us that the rest of the world looks at us with doubt towards our humanity and morals. I'm not here to preach or to say, look at me, because I'm just as at fault as the next person. I find that being here makes me realize the great country we have and the obligation we have to keep it that way. The 4th has just come and gone, and I received many emails thanking me for helping keep America great and free. I take no credit for the career path I have chosen. I can only give it to those of you who are reading this, because each one of you has contributed to me and who I am. However, what I do over here is only a small % of what keeps our country great. I think the truth to our greatness is each other. Purity, morals, and kindness passed down to each generation through example. So to all my family and friends, do me a favor and pass on the kindness, the love, the precious gift of human life to each other, so that when your children come into contact with a great conflict that we are now faced with here in Iraq, they are the people of humanity, of pure motives, of compassion. This is our real part to keep America free. Happy 4th. Love you. Marc Lee. And there's a P.S. halfway through the deployment. Can't wait to see all your faces. That letter is an incredible letter. To me, that should be printed out and should be a syllabus in every school in this country. I encourage everybody listening to go to the website, to the America's Mighty Warriors website, and download that, print it out, have your kids read it, keep a copy of it, and let it be one of many thousands of lives who have been changed in reading that, taking it on board, and actually trying to implement that. Mama Lee, again, I'm humbled to have you here. I can't thank you enough for coming. If there's anything that I or we as a group here, here can do to help your cause and keep you kicking ass the way that you have been, let us know, and we're happy to do it. I thank you for being here. Is there anything you'd like to add before we wrap it up?
Nope, I think that's good. I appreciate your support. And as I said, every veteran that's listening, I love you. If there's anything we can do for you, I appreciate the sacrifice that you've made for me, and I will never forget.
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna end on that note. Last thing I will say, as always, I appreciate the listener. Without you guys, we would not have the privilege of doing this. I hope that this message resonates with you guys, and that you, the listener, can appreciate the level of sacrifice that this woman and her family have been through on your behalf. And if not, fucking choke yourself. Love all you guys. You'll be hearing again from us soon. This is Mic Drop.